Kim mentioned that there were some interesting, political dynamics here where the people that you might expect to cover this sort of thing haven't. And I'm curious what your view is, or the view among striking workers is, about the politics of this moment, and whether they are disappointed in any way about one political camp or another not being attentive to this issue.
Well, I've had numerous people ask me, when is the national media going to cover this? And unfortunately, the national media doesn't cover strikes anymore. They don't cover labor actions anymore. Let's remember who owns the national media. It's people who really would prefer that labor just not be talked about at all. So what we end up with are people like Kim and other people who are doing great work out there, getting our story out. But it doesn't hit the NBCs, the MSNBCs, the Fox News. Kim's right. A lot of these folks voted for Donald Trump. They're Fox News watchers. A lot of them didn't, but a lot of them did. This is Alabama, after all, and Alabama voted 60-some% for Donald Trump, and our members reflect the diversity that exists there. But this is a story that you would think Fox News would be all over. But here's the difference. This is a story about working people fighting back against moneyed interests. Okay. What is Fox News besides a moneyed interest? Let's get to the bottom here. And so is, for that matter, so is NBC, so is CBS, Absolutely. So are all of them. So that's kind of where we're at.
How common do you think that understanding of the news media is? Because I feel among liberals who I liaise with most frequently, I think there's genuine kind of surprise or naivete amongst most folks I talk to about the idea that MSNBC or CNN might be as impartial or not be impartial and might be politicized by their advertisers in the same way that a Fox News would. And I'm curious what level of kind of awareness is percolating through different communities about how, frankly, no one at any point in a political spectrum is being served by these companies.
Well, look, I spent a lot of my time over the past 30 some odd years of working in communications and PR in DC and New York and around the country. And I have seen a dramatic change in how the news is covered and how people approach trying to pitch stories and what they do with it. Look at network news. Just take that, for example. If you look at network news, there's no story on there that's longer than 2 minutes. None. The cable news networks may take a story a little bit longer than that, but they're always going to throw their own spin onto it, with the exception of maybe CNN and a little bit about, straight news stories. They all do that. But when there's a political aspect to it, they're all going to put a little spin on it. So I have pitched this story to the networks. I have pitched this story to the national news organizations. And, oh, yeah, great, thanks. That sounds good. And then nothing. So it isn't like we're not trying. They just don't care.
That's incredible. And that then, Kim, puts you in a really interesting position as an independent labor reporter. I mean, there used to be a day where every major paper had a labor reporter, labor desk that was tasked with covering these kinds of stories. I don't want to linger too long on this media aspect of it. I want to get back to talking about what's actually going on with the strike. But just for a moment, I'm curious what it's like for you professionally as you are trying to cover independently and pitch these stories around.
I've been focusing on labor reporting pretty much exclusively for the past few years. I had a previous life in the music industry until I joined a union, and well, here we are. But I usually have a much easier time getting stories picked up. And this one has been a little tougher because, and this is just from the interactions I've had and like my own hypotheses, right? But I think just because a bunch of coal miners in rural Alabama who are more conservative than what you would typically expect from a group of union folks, they maybe aren't as sympathetic of a subject to some of the editors I'm pitching who are well-off people in New York who maybe don't have as much experience with blue-collar life or rural life in America, who don't have that kind of like, oh, we got to help these guys. It's more like, oh, okay, coal? I don't know. Okay, I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I was going to ask, to what extent, and either of you or both of you can address this question, you think the fact that this is the coal industry is affecting the coverage, and perhaps in particular more, liberal media having perhaps less sympathy for an industry that's perceived to be kind of antithetical to the long-term, health or well-being of the planet.
If I could say this, these miners mine metallurgical grade coal, which is not used to generate electricity and is used to make steel. So number one, but the fact that you have to explain that for people to say, oh, well, then maybe I am interested in the story. That is in itself says something, right? So workers are workers no matter what they're doing. I think that's important to point out first of all. But yes, because there is coal is a bad word for a lot of folks and in a lot of communities, and I understand that. But workers are workers, and I guess one of the and every worker from our standpoint that we represent deserves the same representation that every other worker gets. And every other union person in this country would agree with that. So, because they're doing something that some people find distasteful, doesn't make them any less, doesn't make our job any less important to represent them as best we can. So,
I think that's a really good point. This was a difficult dance that, a lot of people were trying to do in the Democratic primary, and also back in 2016. Remember, was it Hillary Clinton that was like, "We're going to put every coal mining operation out of business," right? So that's part of why the left is trying to figure out how to talk about any kind of Green New Deal being a jobs program as well, and with an acknowledgement that these kinds of global environmental solutions shouldn't come at the expense of workers for whom these kinds of jobs have been some of the highest paying jobs in various locations since time immemorial. Kim, you've written about some of the retaliatory efforts that have been taken against the strikers. Can you let us know, fill us in a little bit about what's been going on there?
Right. It's honestly, even if the strike itself hasn't been getting headlines, the fact that the vehicular attacks on the picket lines haven't been getting headlines blows my mind. We're up to 4 documented instances of company people, whether they're supervisors, whether they're scabs, people who are affiliated with the company, who are driving their vehicles into the people on the picket line. Strikers have been sent to the hospital a week or so.
I'm sorry, that just sounds to the uninitiated ear so bizarre. People on multiple occasions in a way that's very difficult, I would assume, to dismiss as just sheer accident, have run their cars into picketing strikers?
Yeah, there's video. It's very difficult to spin a video of a big black truck going down a highway, then turning off onto a dirt area and going straight into a line of people. You can't really spin that. And what's on top of that, something that really, it's a family affair down there, right? Like I've gotten very close with a lot of the women and the auxiliary members who are doing support work, and I talk to them very frequently, and they told me about a week or so ago, one of the women I've spoken to, she got hit. She was on the picket line to support her husband, and she was hit by a burn barrel that, flew out of the way of a truck. And her husband was hit a couple weeks before. So here's an entire family that's been laid out in these vehicular attacks that the companies completely mum about, and somehow it's not national news.
I'm sorry, are the police responding in any way? Why are the people who are perpetrating this so confident that they can act like this with impunity?
Well,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you, Kim.
Oh no, I would just, you probably have more official info than I do. I'll just say that, from talking to my girls, talking to people down there, they tell me, this isn't my, editorializing. People there tell me that the cops don't seem very interested in doing very much. They don't seem to care. When one person was hit, they told me that they pointed out, he went that way. And the cops were like, oh, okay.
Phil, did you have something to add there?
Let me start here. There was an injunction issued at the beginning of the strike that limited the number of strikers at each picket location. We were able to, in later court action, increase the number of strikers who could be there. And under federal law, as long as you keep moving in front of an entrance and you're on strike, you're acting within your rights. If you stop and if you block traffic, then you're in a different situation. And we've done that a few times. But as long as you keep moving, you're acting under your rights under the National Labor Relations Act. The local sheriffs have taken it upon themselves to make their own decisions about what the National Labor Relations Act actually says. And what they are saying is that if you impede traffic, you put your own self at risk. If you walk across an intersection, you're putting your own self at risk. These are not intersections we're talking about here. These are entrances to an industrial workplace off of a 2-lane road, not a highway, that we are exercising our legal rights to walk in front of. And let people go by. We may say a few things at them as they're going by, but we let people go by, and we're not impeding traffic, and our folks are still getting hit anyway.
I'm sorry. So that effectively sounds like some kind of stand your ground interpretation for vehicular assault. Mm-hmm. Kim, you mentioned that there are videos of some of these hit and runs that have happened, and I presume some license plate information, basic ability to make out the make and model of a car, and there hasn't been any to this point criminal prosecution of any of the folks who've been involved.
Folks have told me that some police reports have been filed. Phil, you probably know more about some folks have told me that they've sent documents and evidence to the union. The union probably has some plans there that I'm not privy to. But yeah, no one's I think they're just kind of getting away with it for now, because the thing is, like Phil said, this isn't off a highway. It's not a traditional picket line. There's not like a big group of people walking around with signs. There's 12 little outposts around this giant mine where half the time you don't have cell phone service. So whatever happens out there happens out there. If someone doesn't film it, did it happen at all? So there's a real element of danger there. They're kind of on their own in a way. And it really adds an extra layer of danger to what's happening, and the fact that the company's been allowed to get away with this.
That's incredible.
In the most recent incident that Kim was mentioning, where the wife of the striker was hit on the picket line, she was actually walking right in front of International President Cecil Roberts, was right there and witnessed the entire thing. The police officer saw it. He waved the guy over who hit her to the side of the road, went over and talked to him for a little while, and then let him go on into the mine. Came back and he told the woman who was hit that, well, I could have said something about it, and I could have written him a ticket, but in court I need to have corroborating evidence. So another officer had to have seen it besides me, which is totally complete
what?
BS.
The only corroborating evidence that operates as another officer, police officer, is the only one who can give eyewitness testimony suddenly in the United States of America.
Yep. That's
okay.
Right.
This is incredible. Hey, YouTube, don't forget this is a podcast. To get full episodes, including ones that are behind a paywall, go to patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. To get more episodes, please do subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and like this video.